Welcome back to Horrifying Obsession, where we bring you haunting crime stories, mysterious cases, and the dark secrets hidden behind seemingly ordinary faces. Today, we'll dive into a chilling case that took place in a small boarding house in Binh An District, Dong Nai Province, Vietnam, a bloody tale of betrayal, hatred, and the steep price of wrong decisions. Prepare yourselves, because right after this, we will delve into every detail of this horrifying case, only on Horrifying Obsession. On May 16, 2023, in a small boarding house in Binh An District, Dong Nai Province, the usual calm was shattered by a horrifying event. That morning, the residents of the boarding house began to worry as a foul stench grew stronger, emanating from a room at the end of the row. Initially, they thought it might just be some forgotten garbage or a simple hygiene issue. But as the smell became unbearable, the residents of the boarding house decided to take action. Mr. Tran Van Hung, the landlord, a middle-aged man with many years of experience managing rental rooms, had no idea what awaited him when he decided to check on the room of Lavan Tu. Tu, 27 years old, was a reclusive person, rarely interacting with neighbors, and usually only returned to his room late at night. Those living nearby didn't know much about Tu, except that he was a young man from Binh Thuan who had moved to Dong Nai for work and kept odd hours. As complaints about the foul smell increased, Mr. Hung tried to contact Tu by phone, but all calls went unanswered. The silence from the locked room only heightened Mr. Hung's concern. Finally, under pressure and urgent requests from the other tenants, Mr. Hung decided to take action. He called a local locksmith and decided to break open the door, despite the ominous feeling growing inside him. When the door to the small room, measuring less than 15 square meters, was finally opened, a nauseating stench immediately hit the noses of Mr. Hung and those standing nearby. The rotting odor was so strong that they had to step back and cover their noses to avoid vomiting. The scene before them was unforgettable. The room was cluttered with belongings scattered everywhere. A few empty beer bottles lay on the floor. Bowls and leftover food, already moldy, were strewn across the table and floor. The air in the room was heavy, damp, as if it had been sealed off for several days. But the most haunting discovery was what they found in the attic. When Mr. Hung and a few curious onlookers climbed up to check, they found the body of Lavan Tu. The corpse was in an advanced state of decomposition, swollen and disfigured to the point of being unrecognizable. Tu lay motionless under a thick blanket, covering him from the waist up, as if he had tried to keep warm before dying. The victim was dressed in long jeans and a blue t-shirt. Tu's face was so distorted that it no longer retained its original shape, causing those present to shudder. The traces in the room left Mr. Hung and everyone else with unanswered questions. What had happened here? At first, some speculated that Tu might have been drunk and died in his sleep due to exposure, and especially considering the empty beer bottles and leftover food in the room. But something didn't add up. All the windows in the room were closed, the fan was off, and the weather wasn't cold enough to require such a thick blanket. And most importantly, no one had seen Tu for several days. Fear began to spread among the people's minds. Could this be more than just a natural death? Binh An District Police were quickly called to the scene. Upon their arrival, the scene was immediately cordoned off to prevent any tampering or disturbance. The slow, deliberate footsteps of the investigators echoed in the room, which was now eerily silent. The police began meticulously examining the scene with the utmost caution. Every corner of the room was thoroughly examined, but initially, there were no clear signs of an attack or struggle. However, there was one detail that caught the attention of the police: bruising on the victim's body. These were not injuries caused by external force, but were post-mortem lividity, a physiological phenomenon that occurs after death when blood settles in the lower parts of the body. This indicated that Tu had been dead for at least several days before being discovered. Upon closer inspection, the police noticed that the objects in the room had not been significantly disturbed, but there were signs of ransacking. Tu's suitcase, which contained his clothes, was found open, with clothes crumpled and shoved into a corner haphazardly. Another unusual detail was the presence of women's clothing in the room of a single man. A red piece of lingerie, a slinky dress, and a woman's jacket were neatly hung on a rack. These details led the police to suspect that a woman had been in the room not long before Tu's death. A preliminary autopsy revealed that Levan Tu had not died from alcohol poisoning or exposure, but from mechanical asphyxiation. This ruled out the possibility of a natural death and reinforced the theory that this was a premeditated murder. The perpetrator had acted with precision, suffocating the victim without leaving any clear marks on his neck. However, the most suspicious detail was that the killer had locked the door from the outside before leaving. This action not only trapped the victim inside, but also ruined any attempts to stage the scene as a sudden death. The investigation now shifted toward identifying the second person who had been in the room with Levan Tu and could have been the one who murdered him. The presence of women's clothing in the room was an important clue, but not enough to draw conclusions. The police had to work tirelessly, step by step, to uncover the truth behind this mysterious death. Who killed Levan Tu? What motive drove them to commit such a brutal act? And how did everything unfold so coldly and calculatedly? These questions kept the police on edge, and the investigation was becoming increasingly complex. The mysterious shadows in that small room were now beginning to reveal themselves, but the truth still lay hidden somewhere, waiting to be uncovered by the light of justice. The Binh An District Police quickly secured the scene and began the necessary procedures to preserve all evidence. A professional forensics team was dispatched immediately after Levan Tu's body was discovered. Under the flickering beams of flashlights, experts in protective gear began the process of examining the body, a painstaking and meticulous task to uncover the hidden clues. Tu's body was brought down from the attic. The overwhelming stench and the state of decomposition made the examination more challenging. However, the forensic doctors did not overlook any details, from the bruises to the condition of the internal organs. Tu was found lying on his back, limbs straightened, clothes intact. The thick blanket covering his body initially led the police to believe this might have been a natural death, but the subtle marks on the victim's body quickly dismissed this theory. Through a preliminary examination, the forensic doctors noticed faint indentations on the victim's neck, not clearly identifiable as marks from a rope or strangulation, but enough to confirm that this was not a natural death. Tu's eyes were wide open, a common sign in victims who die from asphyxiation. Combined with the bruising on the chest and shoulders, the forensic team began to suspect that Tu had been attacked and intentionally killed. What was unusual was that there were no signs indicating Tu had resisted. There were no scratches, no cuts, or signs of a struggle. This led to the assumption that Tu might have been unconscious before he was murdered, possibly from drinking too much or being ambushed. The autopsy later confirmed that the cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation, meaning his airway had been blocked until he died. At the same time, the crime scene investigation team began focusing on the details around the room. First, there were the empty beer bottles and scattered dishes on the floor. This suggested that Tu had hosted a small gathering before his death. But with whom? And why did that person kill Tu? Another notable detail was the presence of women's clothing in the room. A light pink silk nightgown, a light jacket, and lingerie were found in the victim's suitcase. This led to suspicion that Tu had a female visitor just before the murder. But who was this woman, and what was her involvement in Tu's death? The investigation team also found that several drawers and the suitcase in the room had been rummaged through. Tu seemed to be a careful person, but these signs indicated that someone had ransacked the room, possibly searching for something. Tu's belongings, including cash and some personal items, were missing without a trace. This supported the theory of a premeditated murder with the intent to rob, but the true motive remained a mystery. One of the most important clues came from the examination of the room's door. The door had been locked from the outside, suggesting that the killer might have tried to cover up the murder by creating a false scene, making it appear as if there was no one in the room except Tu. However, leaving too many clues and traces rendered any attempts to stage the scene useless. The police decided to expand the scope of their investigation, seeking information about the mysterious woman connected to the women's clothing in the room. At the same time, They began gathering statements from those nearby, trying to piece together what had happened before Tu's death. A network of the victims' relationships gradually emerged, and from there, the first pieces of the case began to take shape. The smallest traces at the scene, the fragments of witness statements, all were gathered to create a haunting picture of Lavon Tu's death. The only question remaining was, who was the perpetrator and why? The investigation team knew they were facing a complex case, and the journey to uncover the truth was only just beginning. After confirming that Lavon Tu's death was neither an accident nor natural, but a premeditated murder, the Binh An District Police decided to expand the investigation. Realizing that solving this case would be challenging, they focused on gathering as much information as possible from those living in the boarding house, the victim's friends and colleagues, and anyone with close ties to him. First, the police questioned the neighbors living in the same row of boarding rooms as Tu. These people all described Tu as a reserved person who frequently returned late and kept to himself. He rarely talked to anyone and wasn't even close to the landlord. However, a few people recalled that recently, Tu often hosted a woman. This woman did not live with Tu, but whenever she visited, she stayed for quite a while and left early in the morning. Some people also mentioned that they had heard arguments between Tu and this woman a few weeks before his body was discovered. The police also looked into Tu's work at a nearby mechanical workshop. Tu's colleagues described him as a rather mysterious person who rarely talked about his personal life. Despite this, Tu had a close relationship with a colleague named Hong Van Hai. Hai had helped Tu with many things, but recently it seemed there had been a conflict between them. Hai often drank with Tu and had once mentioned that his girlfriend had an unclear relationship with Tu. However, when questioned, Hai insisted he had nothing to do with Tu's death and had an alibi. From this initial information, the police began to suspect that the woman who frequently visited Tu's room might hold the key to solving the case. Upon further investigation, they identified this woman as Tran Thi Duyen, who had previously rented a room with Tu. Duyen was a charming woman with a beautiful appearance, easily gaining people's trust. She had lived with her husband, Nguyen Van Son, in another area of the district, but after meeting Tu, Duyen frequently visited him. When questioned by the police, Duyen appeared nervous, but skillfully responded that she and Tu were just friends and that she was not in Dong Nai at the time of Tu's death. Duyen claimed that on May 14th, she had returned to her hometown in Binh Thuan to visit her family and could prove this through her family members. However, Duyen's nervousness did not escape the investigators' notice, and they decided to investigate further into her relationship with Tu. During the investigation, a crucial lead emerged when the police checked Tu's call history. The last number to contact Tu on May 12th belonged to Nguyen Van Son, Tran Thi Duyen's husband. This made Son a prime suspect, and the police decided to summon him for questioning. Initially, Son remained calm and insisted that he had nothing to do with Tu's death. Son explained that he and Duyen had some marital issues, and he knew that his wife had an illicit relationship with Tu. However, Son claimed that he had no motive to kill Tu and that on May 12th, he was at home taking care of their children. However, when the police presented evidence, including footage showing Son riding on the back of Tu's motorbike on the day Tu went missing, Son began to lose his composure. The signs of anxiety and inconsistencies in Son's statements gradually surfaced, leading the investigators to doubt his story. After hours of interrogation, under pressure from the police, Nguyen Van Son could no longer keep his secret. He confessed that he was the one who killed Tu. Son explained that after discovering his wife, Tran Thi Duyen, was having an affair with Tu, he became extremely angry and hurt. However, instead of confronting his wife directly, Son decided to take revenge by killing Tu. According to Son's confession, on May 12th, he went to meet Tu under the guise of wanting to talk things over. After Tu drank alcohol and became intoxicated, Son took advantage of the situation to carry out his plan. He used a pillow to suffocate Tu while he was sleeping, then ransacked the room looking for valuables. Son locked the door from the outside before leaving the scene, hoping that Tu's death would be mistaken for an accident. With Son's confession and the evidence collected, the police had sufficient grounds to charge him with premeditated murder. With all the evidence gathered, the case of Lê Văn Thu was quickly brought to trial at the Dong Nai Provincial People's Court. Public interest in the case was significant, not only due to the brutal nature of the murder, but also because of the tangled relationships and family secrets that were revealed during the investigation. The trial took place on the morning of July 25, 2023, with a large attendance of local residents, journalists, and both the victims and the defendants' relatives. Nguyen Van Son was tried for the crimes of murder and robbery. Additionally, Truong Thị Duyen, Son's wife, was present in court as a key witness, although she was not directly charged. The prosecutor began the trial by presenting the evidence gathered during the investigation. They emphasized that Nguyen Van Son meticulously planned and deliberately executed the murder of Lê Văn Thu. Surveillance camera footage, the final call between Son and Thu, and Son's confession were all clearly presented before the court. The prosecutor argued that this was a calculated murder, not a spontaneous act of rage. When questioned, Nguyen Van Son admitted to all his actions. He explained that after discovering the affair between his wife and Thu, he felt betrayed and lost all sense of reason. From a loving husband and father, Son had become a murderer driven by deep hatred and emotional pain. Son stated that on May 12th, he arranged to meet Thu under the guise of reconciliation, but in reality, he intended to commit murder. He admitted to purchasing alcohol and deliberately getting Thu drunk, then taking advantage of Thu's incapacitated state to smother him. Son also admitted to ransacking Thu's room, not to steal valuables, but to create a false crime scene to mislead the investigation. However, when questioned about his true motive, Son appeared confused. He admitted that while he understood rationally that his actions were wrong, he could not control his anger and sense of betrayal. "I couldn't bear the thought of Duyen and Thu being together behind my back. In a moment of rage, I let my anger take control and did something I never thought I would do," Son said, with tears in his eyes. When called to testify, Truong Thị Duyen appeared deeply emotional. She admitted to having an extramarital affair with Lê Văn Thu, but insisted that she had no idea her husband had discovered it and never imagined that Son would act so brutally. Duyen recounted that she and Thu met by chance when she visited the mechanical workshop, where Thu worked to inquire about some household repairs. Initially, their relationship was purely platonic, but over time, mutual concern and sharing led them to cross the line from friendship. "I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I was drawn into a relationship that I couldn't escape. I never thought it would lead to such a tragedy," Duyen tearfully confessed. Duyen also admitted that she had considered ending the relationship with Thu, but lacked the courage to do so. "I was too weak, and that weakness ended up destroying both men in my life," she said, her eyes red with tears. The defense lawyer for Nguyen Van Son sought to reduce his sentence by emphasizing that Son's actions stemmed from severe emotional distress. They argued that Son was profoundly provoked by his wife's betrayal, leading to an act committed in a state of loss of control. The lawyer also highlighted that Son had voluntarily confessed to his crimes from the beginning and had cooperated with the authorities. However, the prosecutor disagreed with this argument. They contended that while Son may have been emotionally hurt, it did not justify his brutal actions. The prosecutor called for a strict sentence to ensure justice was served and to send a strong message that acts of violence cannot be tolerated. After hours of deliberation and consideration, the jury delivered their final verdict. The court found that Nguyen Van Son's actions were deliberate, meticulously planned, and carried out with extreme cruelty. However, the court also acknowledged Son's confession and his expression of remorse. As a result, Nguyen Van Son was sentenced to life imprisonment for premeditated murder and robbery. This harsh sentence was deemed appropriate given the severity of the crime he had committed. Truong Thị Duyen was not charged, but the court emphasized that she also bore moral responsibility for the tragic consequences caused by her extramarital affair. The case concluded with mixed emotions among those involved in the trial and the public who followed it. This was not just a murder case, but also a story about greed, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of poor choices. Nguyen Van Son paid a steep price for his actions, but this tragedy also serves as a stark warning to everyone about the value of loyalty and respect in relationships. Emotional wounds can lead to severe consequences, and no action can justify resorting to violence to resolve conflicts. This case closes with a profound lesson on how to treat others and the importance of maintaining trust in relationships. It also serves as a reminder that sometimes forgiveness and dialogue may be a better solution for emotional wounds, rather than letting hatred overpower reason. After the trial ended, Nguyen Van Son faced a life sentence in prison. The long days ahead in confinement would be the price Son had to pay for his brutal actions. His life, once ordinary, had become a tragedy, condemned by society and haunted by the memory of his crimes. Truong Thi Duyen, although not legally responsible, had to face the guilt and punishment from her own conscience. Her illicit relationship not only led to Le Van Thu's death, but also shattered the lives of many people around her. Duyen decided to leave her hometown, carrying her painful memories, hoping to find peace elsewhere, but she knew that the emotional scars would be hard to heal. Le Van Thu's family, having lost their only son, had to endure an irreparable loss. The incident left them with painful questions about why Thu became involved in a relationship that led to his tragic death, and they had to face the pity and rumors from society. This story is a powerful warning about choices and their consequences. Every decision we make, whether in anger or in moments of weakness, can lead to unforeseeable outcomes. In this case, betrayal and greed destroyed the lives of 3 people and spread pain to those they loved. Greed and betrayal not only affect those directly involved, but can also trigger a chain of tragedies. The choices between right and wrong, honesty and betrayal, love and hatred, are what determine each person's fate. Thank you for staying with Horrifying Obsession to follow this story. This is not just a story about crime, but also a lesson about life, about the values we should cherish and protect. If you found this story thought-provoking, please share it so that others may also recognize the importance of these values. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to not miss the next stories. We will continue to bring you gripping stories and deep life lessons. Remember, life is a series of choices. Choose wisely to avoid irreversible mistakes so that each day is one where you live true to your values and conscience.